I originally wrote this rant, Patty's Problem, in 1989 and did it as a commentary on a radio show I then did in Atlanta. It was up on YouTube for a few years until the Google speech police pulled my channel, along with around 20,000 others that failed their political purity test. Patty's Problem. A true story. In 1978, my wife and I came to know a young woman named Patty. She was a devoutly religious young mother who'd become more devout when her husband and father of her two small sons, aged 2 and 6, informed her that he was leaving. In dire consequences, I offered to let her stay in our former home in Chamblee, which was not rented at the time, rent-free until she got back on her feet. She had been homeschooling the 6-year-old for about 2 years, using very well-done Christian course materials from an organization in Texas, Accelerated Christian Education. The lad had recently been tested and placed at least a year above his chronological age. As required by the government school authorities at the time, she dutifully apprised the authorities of his scores. For reasons which would become clear in a moment, Patty had been harassed by the DeKalb County school authorities for about 6 months, and by the time she moved into the Chamblee house, had, unbeknownst to us, been ordered by the county to put her 6-year-old into the nearest government elementary school or suffer the consequences. Because she wanted the boys to be educated as Christians, there was no way she was going to do that, and she told them so. At approximately 2 a.m. one morning, a loud knock on the door announced the arrival of the aforementioned consequences. Dressed only in a nightgown, she was confronted by several burly police officers who thrust an arrest warrant in her face. With the now awakened 6-year-old watching and the 2-year-old wailing in the other room, she was handcuffed and led out the door to jail. She was tossed into a large cell with a couple of hookers and a junkie who spent much of the rest of that morning vomiting in the corner. The 2 young boys, for whom the educational authorities had professed such great concern, were just left at the house, alone. Patty was later told that the bureaucrats from Children's Services who were supposed to accompany the cops were late, and in their haste to get this dangerous miscreant behind bars, the cops just missed the fact that the Children's Services people were, well, missing. The Children's Services folks showed up about an hour later to find 2 terrified kids, one of whom had just seen his mother hauled off in cuffs. Patty was ultimately brought to trial under the Georgia truancy statutes. Her pro bono attorney tore the school authorities to shreds, and hers was called the case that opened the floodgates to homeschooling in Georgia. Once they had all the facts, the jury didn't take long to acquit her. I'm proud to have played a small part in that. At Patty's trial, a previously overlooked aspect of the government schools was put into sharp focus for those paying attention. The Director of Instruction for DeKalb County testified that the current 7-hour school day consisted of an average of approximately 3 hours or less of instruction. At that time, Patty was devoting 4 to 5 hours a day in direct instruction to the boys. He also as much as admitted that the real reason they wanted all these kids in school was the $3,000 per kid per year, I'm sure that number is much higher today, they then got from the state and federal government. Empty seats equal lost funds. As in most things, follow the money. Patty homeschooled these 2 boys through high school. And how did the boys turn out? One is now a physician and the other a professional writer. But that now seems to be the norm for the growing legions of homeschooled kids, which most likely explains why the NEA and the government school folks feel so threatened. For what it's worth, a homeschooled kid won one of the national spelling bees shortly after this event. Thomas Jefferson believed an educated public to be the cornerstone of the system he and the other founders tried to leave behind. He would not, I feel certain, be a big fan of the current government education system. If he returned today, he'd homeschool, just as he did before. One final note. It was around 2009, during the Obama years, that seemed like a century to any who grasped where this very unfunny clown was steering America, and he proposed lengthening the school day and the school year, that I added this tag. No, 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 Oboza, you have it all wrong, as usual. If the Marxists over at the Department of Indoctrination, or Education, would pull out all the socialist propaganda and devote that time to actually educating these kids in critical thinking skills and the 3 R's, the school year could probably be compressed into the school quarter. A far better solution is for the incoming crop of new legislators to defund the Department of Education, shut it down, and then turn the states loose to scrap the entire rotten system for one where the parents decide where their kids are educated and what they're learning.